Hogwarts, rising as Harry's twin with power. Episode 156. Snape's memories. The invisibility cloak you bought. Dumbledore looked at him with a look on his face. Snape opened his mouth. He really did not expect that the first reason why Darren was exposed was related to him. This action stunned Quirrell. Even Voldemort showed his face as a result. He laughed and looked very happy. Snape pursed his lips in chagrin. He already knew that he would not prepare an invisibility cloak for the cub. Why aren't you surprised at all that it's me? Because of Darren's calm, Voldemort finally stopped laughing. He began to inquire with interest. Snape listened to Voldemort's questioning and noticed that Darren was really not at all surprised that Quirrell was here. Had Darren not suspected it at all? No, I knew from the beginning that it wasn't Professor Snape. He was very good to me. Where is the good? It's not ordinary yet. He had never given him any preferential treatment. Why did this child think he was good? The professor is so nice, gentle, and kind. I can't imagine the professor doing bad things. The cub was still there gushing. Snape blushed a rare red face. He was embarrassed to hear what this little cub had said. Voldemort laughed at his stupid words. After another nourishing conversation, they infuriated Voldemort. Since you both feel that the Philosopher's Stone is not mine, it seems that I have to choose one of the two of you to be punished, Harry Potter, and that is you. Voldemort laughed maniacally. He raised his wand and aimed it at Harry. Snape looked at Dumbledore. Dumbledore closed his eyes. Apparently, he felt that this was what the savior needed to bear. But this is a drill mantra. Snape subconsciously tried to stop him, but Dumbledore snatched his wand. He shook his head silently. Snape shook his forehead and looked there, where he thought Harry Potter would lie there. But there lay Darren Porter. Ha, Harry, you're quick. Run. The cub's face was particularly pale, his voice was weak, and he was screaming almost every second. I didn't even have the strength to scream in the back. He curled up on the ground, covered in cold sweat. Obviously this is true, not the way Betsy does. But why would Dumbledore, the savior cultivation program, allow an innocent child to be tortured? Will he die? He may also become a fool like Mr. and Mrs. Longbottom. You cultivate your savior, why bother the cubs? He was almost on the verge of grabbing Dumbledore and questioning him, but Dumbledore looked at him solemnly and told him to calm down, not to spoil things, or Darren's curse would be in vain. Oh, yes, it's in vain. I don't know how many minutes. Snape watched as Darren closed his eyes and watched Harry pass through his chest with the black air he had transformed into by Voldemort. Only then did he stumble in front of Doluin and carefully pour him with a potion. Severus, this is necessary. Dumbledore walked over to Harry and Darren. He tried to check the status of the two children, but was forced to retreat by Snape with a fierce look. Dumbledore, don't touch them. What the greatest principal is, but a coward who gives the responsibility to the child to complete. I don't know how you beat Grindelwald. Maybe as the tabloid newspaper says, you just released a handkerchief. Ha, Severus. I can't do it. If I had the slightest idea, I wouldn't let the kids do this kind of thing. Dumbledore's tired whisper. You are Dumbledore. Yes, I'm Dumbledore. But I'm not omnipotent. Severus, you have to admit the fact that I'm old. But you can kill him. You can, even if you're old, you can do it, you can kill him. Or what else do you want me to do? I can do anything. Snape pleaded and looked at the old man in front of him. They are still children. When he saw the two children lying there alive and dead, he even seemed to be back to that night. Obviously he can do anything. Why can't he let him do it, so that the children have a normal school life? Yes, Severus, you're right. Tom can be killed. Even if I'm old, I can kill him again. But what about afterward? After what? Harry had killed him once, but he was alive again. I am now desperately trying to kill him, waiting for me to die. Is he alive again? Snape quivered his lips. But they're still kids. Yes, but the prophecy brought them in. Darren is innocent, but he is Harry Potter's younger brother, and no Death Eater would let him go because of the innocence of the Savior's brother. Do you understand? Dumbledore said solemnly. It's just that his throat is a little choked. It represents the intolerance in the old man's heart. Finally he straightened up and gently concluded, and the reason for the prophecy to go out, or rather, the reason for them. It's you, Severus, it's you. It's me. Snape sat down on the ground. I don't blame you. As long as the prophecy is there will be no impermeable walls. I just want to say, better for Harry. I know you're angry, more for Darren, but you see the scar on Harry's forehead. I hope you treat him a little better. He needs love, more love, the best love in the world. I hope you can. I can't do it. Snape looked up at Dumbledore. I know what you mean, Dumbledore. You want me to feel guilty, to make me better with Harry Potter. But you look at that face. James Potter, what kind of damage has he caused me? Have you ever managed it? The first time I saw Harry Potter, I even wanted to kill him. Snape pointed angrily at Harry. He stared at Dumbledore in a blank stare, until the old man conceded defeat and avoided his gaze. So. I'm sorry, Severus. Whether it was before, or just now, sorry. Episode 157. Snape's memories. Snape was much quieter during the summer holidays. He lived back in Spider's Tail Lane. Occasionally, passed by Privet Road. He would sometimes hear laughter inside. Both Darren and Harry Potter are very happy. Sure enough, Darren was liked everywhere he went, except for that orphanage. Thinking of the orphanage, Snape smiled sarcastically. He reported the orphanage. The current Mrs. Linda has been arrested for misappropriating donations, and is now in jail until she hands over all her donations before she is released. Otherwise, the sentence will be based on the amount of money The guy named Kenley, Snape suspected of having troll blood. Cured of Gigania by Snape, he now looks about as tall and thin as Darren, hoping that he can withstand the revenge of being bullied by children before. Because of the events of the last semester, Snape thought about it, and on their birthday, he still sent Darren a set of photo albums of Lily and Potter. Of course, if Harry Potter wanted to see it, he wouldn't refuse it. This was what he had asked Dumbledore to ask for from one of Potter's friends. Then he added some separate pictures of Lily to make it. I hope to make these two children feel less left. He didn't have the past, or he was farther away, and as Dumbledore said, he paid too much attention to Darren. He couldn't go on like this anymore. This is not conducive to acting with the Dark Lord when the time comes. It would be a pity if he could make Darren hate him to the bone, like Harry Potter. That little cub, like a fool, always foolishly believed him. Snape had some irritated thoughts. Then in the evening I was informed that Harry Potter had been warned by the Ministry of Magic for using magic outside of school. Scold, what a Harry Potter can do. Snape didn't take it to heart at all, as long as it wasn't Darren who did it. If Darren had been warned of his use of magic, it would have been dangerous. Next, Snape learned that they were staying at Weasley's house. It's really tossing. He was boiling potions at home, with no reason. One day, as soon as he arrived at Hogwarts to get something, he heard the portrait say that Lucius was coming and arguing with Dumbledore. It's crazy. Last year with Dumbledore to fire Darren, how did it come again? And didn't you hear that there was no decision-making power at Hogwarts? Interested, he went to Dumbledore's office to see the hilarity, only to find that Lucius was talking about Darren and Harry Potter. He learned from Draco that Darren and Harry Potter had protected the Philosopher's Stone and were on a sand rack with Dumbledore. Asked Dumbledore why he put the Philosopher's Stone in school. Asked Dumbledore if he had taken the school as his home. It's extremely hard to hear. Snape admired his friend's greatness. The sarcastic words were so full that Dumbledore was so angry that he seemed to have to learn. Also, Dumbledore, why did you recommend Darren and Darren Porter as Nicolamer's heir? Do you have a brain? Shit. Did you get my consent? Lucius shouted angrily at Dumbledore. Snape was stunned. He wasn't shocked that Dumbledore had recommended Darren as Nicolame's heir. He had known it long ago. Dumbledore had told him. He also thought it was good. He even felt that it would be better if Nicole May had been a little more aggressive and erased Darren's Potter surname. He personally found Darren LeMay to be very nice. Of course, those were all a little idea of his. He was shocked by Lucius's face. How many faceless people can say this? The question of the Philosopher's Stone, he felt that Lucius was right. Dumbledore, who had brought the Philosopher's Stone into school, had been a bit disregarded for the safety of his students. But recommending Darren as his heir was Dumbledore's personal affair. And what did it have to do with him? Lucius still have to inform him? If I hadn't heard from the Ministry of Magic today that Nicole May was coming to see his heir and asked a little more questions, I didn't even know about it, and Darren Porter became Darren Lemmy? Lucius became angrier and angrier as his cane struck the ground. I suppose, Lucius, whose heir is Darren has nothing to do with you, Dumbledore said solemnly. Snape noticed a momentary flush in Lucius's face, and he even wanted to say something, but immediately scolded again. Then he angrily warned Dumbledore that he would not spare Dumbledore. Snape and left with him. Who knew that as soon as he left the office, Lucius would lose his temper with him? Severus. Since you know about this, why don't you tell me? Lucius said bitterly, but Snape felt inexplicable. What did Darren do, and why did he inform Lucius? Could it be Lucius would like Dumbledore to recommend Draco? You're also too whimsical, and you don't look at what your son did. He fights and causes trouble all day in school, lies and deceives people, and his studies are not top-notch. Even the Philosopher's Stone was not protected. Dumbledore recommended him, and people would definitely not accept it. Snape spat unceremoniously. Then he got Lucius's sympathetic gaze. What's wrong with you? Snape was not happy to watch. Then I saw Lucius ask tentatively, you still can't forget that woman? What's the matter with you? Does his emotional life also need to be questioned by others? I just ask, what if you have a friend, he, and the woman you like. Boom. Lucius slammed into the ground. Snape looked at him with a cold expression. Lucius, this is a warning. The next time you dare to make a joke, I will not let you go. No, I was asking another friend of mine. I talked to his favorite woman. And then there was a child. Lucius stuttered an explanation. Snape looked at him with disdain, and he said that he had recently heard that Lucius had an illegitimate child. I didn't believe it at first, but I didn't expect it to be, or Lucius's friend. I advise you to run faster. If I am your friend, I will throw you to the ashes. No problem. No problem. Episode 158. Snape's memories. This farce, Snape did not take it to heart at all. Lucius was an aristocrat, and he was not surprised by what he did, as long as that friend is not him. As for Lily, how is this possible? Snape shook his head, back to his own residence. But before it was over, he was informed that Darren had invented a new antidote. Can detoxify more than 300 kinds. Except for the wolf venom, everything else has a good effect. Genius would. What a genius. If Lily marries him, I'm afraid the child they will have born will be Darren. Even the way he looked forward to it most. He has a similar appearance to Lily, a noble character like Lily, and his talent. Dumbledore even recommended him to the Order of Merlin First Class. Why wasn't this kid his? Snape covered his face bitterly. In the blink of an eye, the school started. He noticed that neither Harry Potter nor Darren had come. He was a little bored in a daze. What did Harry Potter do with Darren on his side? Hope not to cause trouble. Just as he was thinking, he saw Darren sneak in from outside. After noticing his attention, the cub quickly lowered his head in guilt. Laugh at. Isn't it that he is late, and he can still be angry? He turned elsewhere, the province looking at the little cub nervously, but he didn't look at it for a moment, and the little cub's sad voice rang out. Please, tell me, where is my brother? Can someone as big as Harry Potter lose it? Snape complained. Then he heard Draco say that Harry Potter was flying in the sky in a car, and he was stunned. He hastened to take the daily profit that Lockhart had set aside. Front page headlines. Harry Potter drives a flying car, or a Hogwarts privilege. What a bummer. Snape looked annoyed. Compare that reckless little devil to Darren, who is terrified and begging others to tell where his brother is. It's like a joke. Just as Snape was silently complaining, he suddenly heard the screams of Slytherin House. Dean, Darren is bleeding. Professor, Darren. Professor, save Darren. These voices come and go. He rushed down and came to Darren's side. The little cub was covered in blood, and his eyes were empty looking ahead, and his mouth was murmuring to his brother. And a powerful force is spreading out of his body. Potter, he shouted almost subconsciously. Don't want to die? You're crazy. Just relax. Porter. Darren. Calm down. He couldn't help Darren suppress it, he had to rely on Darren himself. But looking at his delirious look, Snape didn't even know if he would die, until, Darren Porter. The auditorium was blown up by you, and it is likely that some students will die. Would you like to? He said in the little cub's ear. He felt that perhaps this was the only way to save him. Really? The cub gradually regained his senses. It's just that his mind is full of worries about other people's accidents, worried about professors, worried about classmates, worried about Harry Potter. A face as pale as paper. Finally, he sat on the ground with red eyes, obviously without tears, but people's hearts were constantly trembling. Snape saw several Slytherin girls in tears. The Gryffindor Miss Mastermind even had to run to help the cub, but was stopped by the professor next to her. They were worried that the cub would get out of control again. In particular, the little cub began to fall into his own emotions again, sitting in the same place, making people look shocked. Potter, drink. Snape cautiously walked over to him and pulled out the potion for him. He still had his wand in his hand, and once Darren was in danger of getting out of control again, he decided to knock him unconscious. Maybe it's best to drag Harry Potter over to explain it to him. Fortunately, after he screamed, it seemed to interrupt Darren's thoughts. Even when he was not very conscious, he recognized his potion. Snape snorted and looked better. Before the cub could react, he took the potion and poured it into him. Cough, cough, cough. The cub coughed violently, and then Snape saw the reproachful eyes of many people. Many girls even glared at him boldly. Oh, he remembered. When school starts, these people will have to deduct points. While taking the cubs to the school doctor's office, Snape could still hear Professor McGonagall's slightly distressed voice behind him. Severus. You can't go against the student's will. Oh, poor little Darren. Well, if he hadn't drugged that guy, it would have turned into poor little Darren. Inside the school doctor's office, Snape finally learns why Darren is like this. It turned out that this guy had been seriously injured before coming to school to save Nicole Flame, and the Ministry of Magic had only given him a simple treatment to let him come to school. It should have been able to support until the end of the dinner and then go to the school doctor's office. Who knew that because of the fear of Harry Potter, there would be a sudden magic riot in the end? He sat outside the school doctor's office, with his head in his arms, full of bitterness. Lily, what would you do if you knew that your child was so kind enough to block the gun for others? He really inherits all your good qualities and makes it impossible to be harsh. Even only full of heartache remained. This child made him dare not even say anything serious. Even after the magic riot, he was worried about others. He sometimes even wished the child would be a little more selfish, perhaps more like Potter, and a little worse. That wouldn't be terrifying all day. When he heard Dumbledore's voice, Snape wanted to laugh hard, even a mocking laugh. But I couldn't laugh at all. When he thought about the character of the little cub inside, he had a headache. Especially hearing Dumbledore say that Darren is okay. Almost died. Is it okay? Speaking of which, we have to thank the Savior for being photographed with his whereabouts. Otherwise this stupid boy is afraid that he will die here in a hurry, right? Snape thought irritably. Then he heard Dumbledore tell him to be nice to Harry Potter and take Lily's eyes as an example. Had he not seen Darren's eyes? Has he fallen to the point where he needs to rely on a shrunken version of James Potter to miss Lily? Scold. That's right. Since Dumbledore had said that he wanted him to be close to Harry Potter. So, I'll go and wait for Harry Potter now. As Dumbledore said, maybe I should get close to that child. Episode 159. I want to see Darren. Harry felt that the most terrifying scene of his life had been presented in front of him. It was Snape looking at him with a straight face. Yes, just smiles. Snape was smiling at him, whether he was laughing or not, but just laughing. He was deeply suspicious that Snape might have some kind of conspiracy. Come with me. Snape turned. He strode ahead, and Harry and Ron hardly dared to look at his robe. They dragged their luggage and looked honestly at the ground, like a shrunken marmot. They followed Snape up the steps and into the empty and echoing foyer lit with torches. The smell of food came from the great hall, but the voice was so small that Harry felt that it might be the reason why they were so far away. Instead of letting them into the auditorium, Snape led them down the stone staircase into the dark, damp corridors of the basement. Then Snape opened the office in the hallway. "Get in." Snape pointed inside. Harry and Ron walked in hesitantly. Their faces were filled with fear and dread. They could even see the jars in Snape's office, which were soaked with all sorts of disgusting stuff. They don't even want to know the names of these things. Ah, the famous Harry Potter, he's famous again. It made headlines in the Daily Prophet's newspaper, which was great. I remember the last time Harry Potter made headlines. It was at Lockhart's signing party, right? You put your brother aside, took a picture of yourself with a celebrity, and happily promoted his books, your fame, for him. You guys are a win-win. Of course, it was with someone else, and our famous Harry Potter was obviously very dissatisfied, so he made a headline for Snape and gushed out. Harry couldn't help but interrupt him. "I didn't. Is the platform can't get in?" Yeah, so you made a big move and flew to school, but it's addictive." Harry interrupted him again. "I said, I didn't want to make a splash, I couldn't get on the train, I couldn't do it." "No way?" "Huh, so the great savior can't use his owl to deliver letters to school. Nor could he send a letter to his brother, or even return to the burrow, waiting for the Weasleys to settle the matter." Snape suddenly looked at Ron, who whispered, "I remember Arthur working in the office where Muggle abuse is forbidden, right? But his son..." Boom. Harry and Ron's faces changed at the same time. Their faces turned pale. Snape looked at their faces and felt a little more comfortable. Then he laughed again and told them the bad news. "The savior probably doesn't know yet, right? Just half an hour earlier, his brother had had a magic riot, almost out of control, covered in blood and sent to the school doctor's office. It's all because of someone's feet." "What nonsense are you talking about? You're a liar, aren't you?" Harry and Ron looked up in shock and trepidation. "How come?" "In the morning, Darren was fine, and he was taken away by Mr. Nicole May to discuss the matter of the heir. How did something happen at night?" "Huh, then I don't know. After all, he is the brother of the famous Harry Potter, and not my one." "Please, who told me where my brother is? Just tell me, and let me do whatever I want," Snape said impersonatively. Then he sneered at Harry. "I think the famous Harry Potter must be thinking, how could he have such a troublesome brother?" Once again, the news that blocked his limelight was that there was no way to be admired and welcomed by the whole school. "I didn't think so. You tell me, how is Darren doing?" Harry looked angrily at Snape. If he hadn't been afraid of Snape, he would have even tried to tug on Snape's collar to force him to tell him what was wrong with Darren. "What's wrong?" "The poor potions professor is not a doctor and cannot heal, and he can only watch a big man get angry at him here. I want to see Darren." "Quiet," Snape shouted angrily. He looked into Harry's eyes and said, "When I inspected the garden just now, I found that a precious beating willow had been greatly damaged. That beating willow is only a big injury to us." Ron couldn't help but call out. "Shut up," Snape roared again. "It's a pity that I'm not your dean, and I can't make the decision to expel you. But I can go and find someone who can make this pleasant decision. Come over." Snape leaned down and smiled sinisterly. "You are waiting here." Harry and Ron trembled with fright. They don't know what will happen if they are fired. Even Harry was somewhat pessimistic in his thought that Darren might die because of him, the magic riot, and he will be thrown out of school, and then the portraits of the Potter family ancestors will shame him and forbid him to return to the wizarding world. He ended up slipping back to the Dursleys. He would lose everything he had now and fight back to the way he had been before. No one will like him anymore. The Dursleys would still ask him what about Darren? Then they will know that Darren and his parents have been buried in the wizarding world for a long time. No. He couldn't imagine it at all. Because when he thought that Darren would die because of him, the magic riot, he was already in tears. How could he lose Darren? They were the best twin brothers, and Darren was also the best and most perfect brother. How could Harry die while he was still learning how to be a perfect brother? "Potter, I think I should have not physically punished you before that. Don't pretend as if your poor potions professor almost killed you." Snape's cold voice came over. Harry quickly looked up, and he noticed Professor McGonagall behind Snape. "Professor Darren, is he all right? I'm glad you can still think of him, Potter, or I should have blushed for my students. He is still alive and Severus's potion suppressed his wounds very well." "Don't make that look. Severus is the best potions master." "Of course, Darren is the future potions master." Cough. "Now I'll talk about you guys again." Episode 160, I'm going to the school doctor's office. "Sit." Professor McGonagall resumed his cold expression, sternly let them sit down. After seeing them sit down, she raised her wand. Harry and Ron Hart mentioned the throat eye. Although he felt that Professor McGonagall would not do anything out of the ordinary, they had caused too much trouble this time. "So Professor McGonagall, is there really going to punish them with spells? Maybe this spell requires them to sit down?" Harry and Ron shrank up, and they decided that even if Professor McGonagall cast a spell on them, they would not leave Hogwarts. Fortunately, Professor McGonagall simply lit the fireplace in the room. A raging fire burned inside the stove. "Explain it." Professor McGonagall looked at them coldly. Harry hurriedly explained everything in 150. "So, why don't you let your owl send a letter over?" Harry and Ron lowered their heads. They stuttered, because Snape asked the same thing. It seems that they can think of this method as a very easy thing to do. Well, they now thought it was very easy to come up with, but unfortunately, they thought there was only one way to drive to school. Bang bang bang. Coming in was Dumbledore. His expression was more serious. Harry also noticed Snape's schadenfreude appearance. His heart lifted again. Dumbledore had come, probably to announce their expulsion. Harry and Ron began to miss when they were attacked by the beaten willow. Why are you doing this? After a long silence, Dumbledore asked. Just as they were about to explain again, they heard Snape unceremoniously interrupt them. The reason they do this, of course, is to make a splash. I heard them say that tomorrow's Daily Prophet headlines will still be them. Such an opportunity to make a splash. How can Potter let it go? Albus, I propose to expel them. They are simply the black sheep of Hogwarts, and no one in the academy can accept them. We didn't think like that. Harry glared into Snape's eyes. He was angry. Sure enough, Snape didn't think to let him go. He had thought that Snape had heard him explain to Professor McGonagall that he was not speaking because he was not qualified to speak of Gryffindor. As a result, he was silent for half a day, just to slander him in front of Dumbledore. You two probably think more. Snape's expression was grim, and Harry suspected that if Professor McGonagall and Headmaster Dumbledore hadn't been here, he might have wanted to come up and kill him. Oh, Severus, don't be so harsh on them. They're still kids. We should give them a chance. So we're not going to be fired? Ron asked excitedly. Dumbledore nodded. Harry and Ron relaxed for a moment. Harry also noticed that Snape's expression was even more irritated, even with unwillingness. It seems that he was not expelled, and the professor was very reluctant. Of course, you will not be expelled this time, but I will write to your home. Finally, I warn you once again that this is the only chance, Headmaster Dumbledore announced. Harry and Ron cheered in surprise. Dumbledore, they also wounded a precious beating willow. Oh, Severus, let the rest be handled by Minerva. This is a student of her academy. There was a custard pie that tasted good, and I had to announce a few notices. Harry watched as Snape was pulled away by Dumbledore, and saw Snape's disgusted gaze, before leaving. But, he was still happy, right to Dursley? Is he still afraid of this? Weasley, you can now go to the school doctor's office, and look at your eyes. Professor McGonagall looked at the blood next to Ron's eyes, her expression still serious, but already willing to talk to them. I'm not going. Ron wiped his eyes. I want to see my sister's sorting ceremony, he said excitedly. It's over, your sister in Gryffindor. Professor McGonagall said expressionlessly. Harry ignored Ron's cheers as he said anxiously, Professor, I want to go to the school doctor's office. I want to see Darren. Even when he heard Professor McGonagall say that Darren was better, he was still a little uneasy. Don't you go, Madame Pomfrey is angry tonight. Don't even think about sneaking in. Because there are already a lot of students sneaking over to visit. Professor McGonagall's face improved a little, and she looked at Harry and continued, you don't have to worry too much. As long as you show up safely, Darren will soon be fine, and you know that what he worries most is you. Of course, hopefully you don't do this kind of thing next time. I don't want us to fire a bold student and lose a student who is both good at character and good at learning, Professor McGonagall said warily. Harry nodded hurriedly, but there was concern on his face. Professor McGonagall did not comfort his mind any longer. She pursed her lips, and then said, because of what happened to you this time, Gryffindor deducted 50 points. Professor, we haven't started school yet, we shouldn't. Professor McGonagall was stunned, and Harry noticed that her lips didn't seem to be so tight. Well, then no points will be deducted, but confinement cannot be less, and your punishment is confinement, she said sternly. Harry, they felt a little lighter, but he would prefer to go to the school doctor's office, or to the banquet, and ask Darren about it. Well, you'll stay here and go back to sleep when you're done, don't run around. Otherwise I would have deducted points for Gryffindor, Professor McGonagall said menacingly, and she knocked on the table, and a sandwich and a pot of pumpkin juice gradually appeared on the table. She turned away and slammed open Snape's office door. It feels. What a bad luck, Ron said with a sigh. He grabbed a sandwich and stuffed it into his mouth, while helplessly saying, who dares to believe that we have encountered so many things? Blame that platform. Yeah, how could it not let us in? Episode 161, you have to be taught a lesson. When they couldn't eat enough in their stomachs, they walked contentedly to the door of the Gryffindor lounge. There was a painting of a chubby lady hanging. Password, she said coldly to them. How do we know? Ron muttered. Then don't go in, the fat lady said fiercely. Her tone listened stunned to Ron, because usually even if she goes out in the middle of the night, the fat lady will only complain a few words, and she is never so angry. It's as if we've done something heinous, Ron said unhappily. Harry nodded doubtfully, but when he saw Hermione coming from outside, he was immediately happy again. The fat lady is angry or not, what does it have to do with them? Or Hermione important? It was only when Harry saw Hermione approaching that he noticed that the expression on Hermione's face was even more furious, as if I wanted to punch them twice. Did you really come by car? Hermione asked in an aggressive manner. Come on, you won't want to accuse us, like Professor McGonagall and Snape. Why not use owls? If we could remember, would we still be standing here? Ron looked at Hermione unhappily. Then he found Hermione even angrier, like an enraged Lady Weasley, holding a wand in her hand that could strike them on the head at any moment. I don't know what you guys do with your brains. Is it to get out of breath? Stop teaching us a lesson. We've been taught a lesson for one night and just want to rest. Ron said impatiently, tell us the password. The password is Honeyeater. The problem is not here. And you just don't listen to me, you have to listen to it for a while. Before Hermione could finish speaking, Ron and Harry had already slipped into the lounge. She snorted and finished the next sentence. You have to listen to other people's lessons, too. Yes. As soon as Harry and Ron entered, they were greeted by Ginny's wand. Of course, she was mainly drawn to Ron, but for the first time, she also looked at Harry with some irritation. I don't know what you're thinking. Did you know you almost killed Darren today? Why don't you write us a letter? Harry, don't you have an L? Ginny didn't start learning magic, but her wand struck her head as hard as a spell. Stop, Ginny, or I'll tell Mom. Ron held his head and shouted, and he even threw a look at Percy for help. But Percy ignored his pleas for help, and he almost clenched his fists and looked at Ron. You don't care what punishment Dad will get for this. His job is likely to be lost, and Darren, when he is sitting on the ground covered in blood, you are not flying in the sky without heart and lungs. Percy gushed as he counted Ron. Harry hadn't been counted, but he felt even more sad than he had been counted. Finally, the two of them returned to the common room in a daze, because few people have a good look for them. Even the most mischievous twins cast disapproving glances at them. Of course, there were also a few excited upperclassmen, but they couldn't save Harry and Ron, because Harry and Ron were surrounded by lessons and counting. Finally, they returned to their dormitory. They glanced at Neville at the door. Neville pursed his lips, and he stood where he was, as if he wanted to say something, but the expressions on Ron and Harry's faces made him retreat unbearably. Seamus and Dean were excited. They also rushed up and patted Harry on the shoulder. Cool, of course you should just let Darren know in advance. Yeah, but you're still very good. The comfort of the two made Harry and Ron slightly happy. Available the next morning, they couldn't laugh anymore, because when they ate in the morning, they didn't see Darren at the Slytherin table. It means he's still in the school doctor's office. And they also received a yelling letter from Mrs. Weasley. It was a red envelope, and when you get your hands on it, you start to smoke. Neville said he had received it too, and then he advised them to destroy the letter. Harry suspected that he was deceiving, because the lying Neville can be seen. It's just that he doesn't understand when he offended him. But by this time, he couldn't think that much, and the roaring letter had been opened by Ron. The car is gone. Do you know how anxious your father and I are? Dumbledore wrote to us that you almost killed Darren. You set a bad example for Ginny. Your dad is going to be investigated by the Ministry of Magic and is likely to lose his job, all because of you. If you don't follow the rules, we'll bring you back. The roaring letter was over. Harry and Ron's heads buzzed. They could even hear Slytherin's cheers. Even Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff had a lot of laughter. Obviously, their actions this time are not at all as popular as they think. Harry was miserable. He wasn't even in the mood to eat breakfast. Hermione also snorted at them, obviously still a little angry. Fortunately, Professor McGonagall came to hand out the curriculum at this time, which diverted many people's attention. The first class was a herbal medicine class. Ron whispered. He didn't dare to speak loudly at all, because everyone in the Weasley family was staring at him. They bowed their heads and walked out of the castle together. Herbal medicine class is held inside the greenhouse. There are all kinds of magical plants growing there. Professor Sprout is a professor with a low mound. The hat is patched. She walked here angrily, still with some bandages on her arms. Harry noticed that she was coming from the direction of the wounded Willow. Next to her stood a Lockhart. Unlike Professor Sprout's displeasure, Lockhart had a smile on his face. Just now I showed you the professor of herbal medicine how to bandage the beaten Willow. He gushed a bunch of words, and finally said, by the way, Harry Potter is out. Harry was pulled out by him in a daze. Then I heard him say, I understand you're Harry. I heard you Professor Snape say that you just want to be famous. Your brother Darren has achieved something, and you must not be convinced. You're not like me. All in all, it's all the beginning. Harry gagged. He suddenly discovered that, in addition to Snape, he had one more hated professor at Hogwarts. Lockhart. Episode 162 gives him extra points. When Harry returned to class, he found that everyone had already started the class. He sat down next to Ron and Hermione. Hermione saw him snort. Apparently the yelling letter didn't calm her down either. Harry was miserable. He could only concentrate on the class and heard Professor Sprout say, we're going to change the pots of the mandrake today. And now, who will tell me about the habits of the mandra? Darren, you. Professor Sprout's face grew sad. Finally she wiped her eyes. Sighing, he said, poor little Darren. Thankfully he was okay. Well, Hermione, come on. Mandra, a powerful restorative that Darren added to the new antidote. Of course, there are others, and I won't say them all, Hermione said with admiration and admiration. Sprout smiled and nodded, and she said, Gryffindor plus 20. She turned and pointed to the mandra. Hermione is right, Darren's latest antidote is the addition of the mandra. Of course, he also used other medicines to neutralize the medicinal properties of Mandela herb. He's a real genius, and if he's here, I'm going to give Slytherin extra points. So, now who told me where the danger of the mandrake lay? Sprout's herbal class passed quickly. It was a very interesting lesson, but then they were uncomfortable, because they were in Professor McGonagall's transfiguration class again. Professor McGonagall asked them to turn the beetle into a button. Harry felt his brain empty, and he had returned everything he had learned last semester, so he was rightly reprimanded by Professor McGonagall. Ron's wand also went wrong, emitting black smoke from time to time and killing a beetle. Professor McGonagall glared at him. They walked to the canteen with their heads down. Harry habitually glanced at the Slytherin table. He stood up with instant delight, because Darren came back from the school doctor's office. As soon as he saw Harry come out, he rushed to the Gryffindor table in excitement. Brother, I knew you would be fine. Darren grinned, but immediately he became a little guilty. I'm sorry brother, I seem to be in trouble for you. Ding, father plus 100, ding, father plus 100, ding, father plus 100, ding. Apparently, quite a few people were eavesdropping on their conversations. Darren Metzi received the father's value. He continued with some embarrassment. My brother must have been punished by the teacher because of me. I knew I should control myself. Blame me, it's useless. Ding, father plus 100, ding, father plus 100, ding, father plus 100, ding. Don't say stupid things, even without you. We will also be punished by the teacher, but I am still a little angry. How can you get excited about the magic riot because I am not there? If something goes wrong, you'll turn into a squib or even die. What do you want your brother to do? Harry said excitedly. Darren's guilty head didn't dare to lift up. I'm sorry, brother. Ding, father plus 100, ding, father plus 100, ding, father plus 100, ding. His expression looked like he was about to cry. Harry could no longer say anything serious, because he remembered, it was all because of him. It's my fault and next time I won't be reckless again, Harry said reassuringly, although he didn't know how long this guarantee was. But at this time, he was sincere. Because of Darren's return, Hermione regained her former friendliness. She even used her wand to change a heart-shaped button for each of them. Oh, Darren, you've really frightened me. Next time Slytherin wouldn't tell you about Harry, you can ask me. I almost thought you were going to die. Hermione hugged Darren sadly. Seeing Darren's guilty expression, he quickly laughed. Okay, well, I'm not accusing you. I'm just worried that you're hurting yourself again. Hermione laughed hurriedly. Darren was so kind that she couldn't bear to say anything about him. Not to mention that this is clearly Harry and Ron's problem. So she turned her head and glanced at the two of them. It's just that Ron is immersed in the mood of his wand being broken, and is silent. And Harry noticed somewhere else. Darren, didn't Slytherin tell you about me and Ron? We heard Snape say that we've made headlines, and they didn't even tell you sooner. And if you knew, you wouldn't have been in a magic riot, Harry said angrily. He looked at the long Slytherin table. Those people are really excessive. How did Darren get unlucky enough to be there? If Darren had been sorted out in Gryffindor, nothing would have happened. It's just that his claim was refuted by Darren. No, I first asked Miss Cassandra, and she really didn't know. Then somehow, I started to feel bad, and then Malfoy, they told me, you are flying in the sky. I was terrified that the magic rioters had nothing to do with the others, and the Slytherin classmates were very nice. They were all very kind. Ding, father plus 50, ding, father plus 30, ding, father plus 40, ding. This time, the Holy Father was not worth much, and obviously everyone thought that what Darren said was a bit incredible. Slytherin is kind. It's a joke to say, they? Good? Kind? Harry felt that Darren must have been cast under a curse. Ron stuttered. He looked at Darren stunned. Looks very eager to grab Darren and shake it. See if he's normal. Ding, sensing that there is a scene of the Holy Father system playing around the host. Now release a temporary mission. Ask Ron's wand and say, I will buy you one. Ding, after the task is completed, get the scene card ×1. Does the host receive the task? Access. Another scene card. Darren took over the mission without hesitation. After all, for him at the moment, 7 or 8 gallons is also a pocket money 7. The wizard's robe he wore was said to have hundreds of gallons. So he walked over to Ron and said hesitantly, Ron, I just heard my Slytherin classmates say that your wand is broken? Yeah, it's completely bad. Ron raised his wand. If you don't give it up, can I buy you another one? Not to look down on you. I have always regarded you as a very important friend and brother. So, can I buy you a magic wand? If you don't mind. Ding, congratulations to the host for getting the scene card ×1. Episode 163, Special Wolf Poison Potion Formula. Ron certainly didn't mind. He was overjoyed, because the wand is no longer available, and if he writes back, the family will definitely say that he deserves it, and with Darren's help, it's clear he doesn't have to be scolded. Harry was happy too. He had thought about buying it for Ron before, but he was embarrassed to say. He was worried that Ron thought he was sympathetic to him. Darren is so smart, but his pleasure did not last long, because what follows is a defense against the dark arts lesson. Last year's defense against the dark arts teacher was Quirrell. Quirrell is a wizard possessed by Voldemort. At the end of last year, he was killed by Harry. This year's defense against the dark arts professor is Lockhart. At first, everyone thought that although Lockhart was exaggerated, he must have been a very powerful professor when he read the books he wrote. Who knows the first class that just started? Instead of asking them any questions about the course, he gave them more than 50 questions about Gilderoy's preferences. Except for Hermione and Darren, almost no one could answer. For this, he rewards Himamine and Darren with 20 points. And that's just the beginning. Behind he unleashed a bunch of ugly, Cornish elves. As a result, he released it and could not take it back. In the end, it was Darren who beat all the elves back. Anyway, a whole lesson is a farce. Harry and Ron thought Lockhart's class was unnourishing, and they might as well play broom in the playground. In the days that followed, life in Darren is very peaceful. Even in Lockhart's classroom, as long as he pretends to be more well-behaved, ignorant, and will not blow Lockhart's, he could watch Lockhart and Harry perform in peace. Because since the first lesson, Lockhart has begun to let people perform the contents of the book. He had let Darren come up once, but when Darren looked confused and asked some of the vague questions in his book, he turned away from Darren. Darren suspects that he may have cast a serious psychological shadow on the Lockhart professor, but maybe it's revenge, and he'll just look for Harry to play various werewolves, vampires. A week after school started, Darren followed Harry as they went to Quidditch Stadium to relax. Wood saw him smile. If another Slytherin had come, he would have thought it was inquiring about his strategy. But Darren, everyone knew he was Harry's little fan, the kindest cub at Hogwarts. Every time I saw his gentle smile, even the haze in my heart would disappear a lot. But he didn't wait for Wood to say hello to Darren. Several figures dressed in green robes came to the court. They all had brooms in their hands. I obviously chartered today's stadium and Wood rushed over in exasperation. As soon as they passed, they saw Captain Slytherin Quidditch triumphantly showing off their new broomstick. Look at our new scavenger and give us a gift for the whole team. Slytherin Captain Flint laughed. Each of them had a brand new broom in his hand. The broom reads Light Will 2001 in a hot gold font. The latest model just came out last month. Flint laughed. He ceremoniously gave up his position behind him. Draco Malfoy stood up arrogantly. The Light Will 2001 can be much better than the old Light Will 2000 performance. As for the older broom, Flint looked at the broom in the other's hand, then laughed. That means self-evident. Use it to sweep the floor. Brooms like Gryffindor have to be stuffed into museum exhibitions, right? Flint laughed sarcastically. Darren immediately stood in front of him. At this time, it is time to shine on them with the light of the Father. I don't quite understand. What does the old and new broom have to do with your playing skills? My brother and his teammates can fly very well even if the broom is old. Darren stood angrily in front of the Slytherin team. Yeah, shame on Slytherin. Following a bunch of Gryffindor asses all day long. What do you think these people can bring you? Flint looked at Darren sarcastically. Whatever the rest of Slytherin's thoughts, he just couldn't get used to Darren Porter. This guy is so annoying. He felt that this guy had just been punished enough to get Miss Becky Greengrass to apply more of a drill spell to him. The last time Slytherin voted for Darren to punish the machine, Flint repaired it several times. He couldn't figure out who was destroying the machine, helping this Potter escape punishment. Sister Becky said that she was still investigating, but she still had no clue. However, Flint believes that as long as it is found out, the student sister must drill those people and Darren Porter together. Darren is better than you people, thanks to the fact that he still says that you people are friendly all day. Shut up, you stinky baking mud seed. Ding, sensing that there is a scene of the Holy Father system playing around the host. Now release a temporary task. Walk up to Flint and point his wand at him and ask him to apologize to Hermione. Ding, after the mission is completed, get a special wolf poison potion recipe. Will the host receive the task? Access. Darren clicked on it without hesitation, then walked over to Flint's side. His wand rested on Flint's chest and he said coldly, apologize to Hermione, or I'll be rude. Ding, congratulations to the host for obtaining a special wolf poison potion recipe. Special wolf poison potion formula, taken within a month after being bitten to avoid turning into a werewolf. Darren discovers that this potion formula is a special version, which is not the same as the medicinal effect in the original book. Moreover, this medicinal formula does not seem to have many medicinal materials that differ from the previous antidote. It looks like the system should be given to him step by step. What a clue that the province has been discovered by others. He wondered if he would take out this potion. You may also receive a medal. Maybe it's still level 1. This fakey is a little weak-hearted, but Darren quickly accepted the reward. He decided to give it to Paige in a moment and let it go into the experiment as soon as possible. Maybe it won't be long before he can be nominated again. Of course, he had to wait for the last medal to come down and then give this to the Ministry of Magic. Otherwise maybe these 2 potions would only give him 1 medal. Cough, although some heart is weak, but what to take or take Episode 164, No Useless Magic. Flint finally gritted his teeth and apologized, because he couldn't beat Darren. He could only glance at Darren with hatred and leave with the team. Originally to provoke, who knows, also apologized, Grey Slippery, back. What he didn't expect was that on the way back, he was also tripped by an armor. The fall was a bit fierce, and his nose was swollen. And that's not the end of it, for as he entered the lounge, he saw Professor Snape. Professor Snape saw him carrying a broom and suddenly remembered that he had lost the game last year at Quidditch. For this, he scolded him fiercely and gave him a confinement. Of course, this is just the beginning. Next, while he was writing his homework in the lounge, several Slytherin students fought. They fired spells at each other, but somehow, a lot of spells fell on him. Before he could get angry, Sister Becky returned from outside, accused of being undressed, and was taken directly to Professor Snape's office. Then Professor Snape was punished with copying the rules 100 times, and another confinement. And that's just the day. From the next day, Flint felt even more unlucky, because even the stairs of the castle did not cooperate with him. Every time he went up, these stairs took him to change direction. Because of this, he was punished many times by the prefect. The prefect thought he meant it. It was deliberately used to provoke him as the new prefect. What a wrong. Flint never had that idea. He liked Quidditch, did not like to be a prefect, and did not mean to be a prefect. But no one believed him. Every time he explained, others laughed at him for daring to do it. In the end, each time it ended in a fight. Then he was called back in and out to Professor Snape's office. According to Professor Snape, if he accumulates too much confinement, he may need to stay in school for the summer. Flint couldn't figure it out, Had he offended Merlin lately? Darren certainly didn't know what happened to Flint. He's been busy brushing around with father values lately. At present, he has used the value of the Holy Father to learn almost all the books of the 2nd grade. There's even room to learn some library books. But the more he learned, the more frightened he became. Because no matter what book he reads, his talent for black magic will increase. It's like there's a little bit of black magic in every book. Now that he closed his eyes, he could come up with a mischievous spell. He just didn't know how powerful it was, because he didn't dare to use it at all. The clock is ticking in October. The wet cold was raging at Hogwarts. Darren wrapped himself tightly. He, a northerner, came here and really couldn't stand this sin. Loose wrapping here can catch wind chills at any time. He was reluctant to receive treatment for Pomfrey's disappearance, because after drinking the potion made by the Pomfrey cousin, there will be smoke in the ears for the next few hours. For a little father like him, this was an unacceptable thing. It's too ruinous. So at this time, he once again thanked Snape for his decision not to let him into the Slytherin Quidditch team, because whether it's Gryffindor or Slytherin, at this time they were all training outside in the rain. Harry came back every time he was soaking wet, and it was still late at night, and with just a little bit of mud, he would be caught by Mr. Filch and given punishment. Darren observed a moment of silence for poor Harry. Ding, aware that there is a scene of the Holy Father system playing around the host. Now release a long-term task. Get Mr. Filch 80 favorability. Please do not use system items. Ding. After the mission is completed, you will receive the advanced bloodline draw once. Will the host receive it? Premium bloodline lottery? What was the bloodline before that? Ordinary bloodline? After the words are withdrawn, will his Lily Mother Wind comment be affected again? But, pick up. Darren quickly found Mr. Filch. Mr. Filch was a man who looked fierce. He had a pair of eyes, and he stared at him, and many of the lower grades would be frightened and shiver. Darren is no exception. He stood pale across from Filch, his body trembling slightly, but he gritted his teeth and said firmly, "Sir, I'm Darren Porter, and the next time my brother gets the mud spot down the hallway, can you please not punish him? You can punish me, I can do those jobs on my brother's behalf. My brother has been training very hard." That's an interesting idea, but why do you think I said yes? Filch snorted with a big nose. You can do whatever you want me to do, whatever you want. That's all said here. Who do you think you are? But Harry Potter did have a penalty, and he made the mud spot all over the corridor yesterday. In the end, because of Peeve's troublemaking, he ran away. Then his punishment will be handed over to you, cleaning my office. Do you dare? Filch smiled darkly. He saw the boy in front of him shrink a little. Yes, how could such a child do such a thing in Filch's office? A disgusting place at Hogwarts. He turned and left. Another pretend child. For example, that person. It's just that. I dare, Mr. Filch. I dare. Darren tugged at Filch's sleeve. Filch was a little embarrassed to see the stain on his sleeve. It's up to you, he said coldly. Roll off your sleeves, then turn around and go. Turning around, there was something complicated on his face. Wholehearted? What is true in this world? Darren showed a worried expression, and he walked slowly to Filch's office. It does look dirty here, because there are many miscellaneous things in it that have been put away. There are also bloodstained chains. There was a strong smell of fried fish in the air. It's a bit sick. Filch didn't come in and didn't know where to go. Darren looked left and right, then knocked on the table with his wand and whispered, "Clean and hygienic." It was a spell he had just invented recently. Clean up. This spell is too clean. It looks like magic is the result of magic, but the spell of clean hygiene is more inclined to the degree of manual cleaning, and the hygiene it makes is not too clean. It looks like trying to wipe for half a day, or a little bit of no clean effect. This is Darren, in the experiment to clean up a newly made spell. He didn't know what the spell was for, but he was convinced that the spell would find its usefulness. For example, isn't this the use of soil? Episode 165 Squibs Become Wizards Theory. Darren called a basin of water and pretended to walk around Filch's office, casting a clean and hygienic spell from time to time. Check, by the way, what else is good about Filch's office. But after looking around, he gave up. The most valuable thing in Filch's office should be the map, and the rest are ordinary things, not as good as he has done. Unfortunately, the map was taken away by Fred, otherwise he could have studied. Ding. Sensing that there is a scene of the Holy Father system playing around the host, and now release a temporary task. In a minute, stain your face, quickly make a living appearance, and then after Filch comes in, make a long working expression, and say, "Mr. Filch, you wait, I will be right away." Ding. After the mission is completed, get the Squib Cannon Wizard Theory idea. Will the host receive the task? Hey, can you also stack temporary tasks in the middle of long-term tasks? Well, there is no conflict either. But this reward, Squibs Become Wizards? It's amazing. If Darren could make Squibs become wizards, I'm afraid he would immediately be able to become a wizard on a par with Dumbledore. Of course, it's just word of mouth, as Paggy said, the great Darren Porter, but he saw right away that it was just a theoretical idea. Apparently, the system wasn't going to let him get the Squibs way to become a wizard now, but just the idea is enough. Gradual, Access. Of course, this task is to be taken. And looked at the time. Obviously Filch is coming. Darren immediately rubbed a few dusts on his face. Then pick up the rag and rub at the table. Filch was stunned at the first sight of his room. Not too clean. It can only be said that it is not bad, much cleaner than his own cleaning, but there is absolutely no effect of the spell. He had been to the offices of other professors, who were spotlessly clean, because they often use spells, and because he is a squib, he hates spells. He was jealous of the students, and hated them for using spells. He didn't even allow house elves to clean his room, because they use spells. This makes him feel very disgusted and jealous. The man also thought that he could please him in this way, so he used it to clean up in his room. Mysterious man. That's some disgusting character from Filch. Yes, in the eyes of many people, mysterious people are big people. He bent down to please him as a janitor, and he should be grateful to Dade. But he was disgusting. He simply didn't like it when people cheated on him. Because he was a squib, he deliberately deceived him with a spell. Just Darren begged him like that, and he was still a little soft-hearted. He left in silence. Give him time to cast the spell. So he thought that his room, the first thing he saw when he came in, should be the result of using a clean-up. It was only when he came in now that he realized that this was really the child wiping it with his hand. There were still a few lines of ash on his face. Seeing himself staring at his face, the boy obviously thought of something, and quickly wiped his face with his hand, but it looked even dirty. Sir, just wait, you'll be fine in a moment, the boy said anxiously, apparently afraid that if he didn't clean the room, he would punish his brother. Hurry up, Filch slammed the door. Give him another chance. The rest of the work, the boy cast a spell he may not mind. It was only when he was called in by the boy that he realized that the room had really been cleaned by hand, not a cleanup effect. The boy did not use a cleanup one new. Count yourself acquainted. Next time if Harry Potter has an error, I'll let you know, Filch said in disgust. Thank you, Darren said gratefully. Ding, father plus 50. After accepting the father's duty, he left Filch's office. He glanced at Filch's favorability, now only 10. This gentleman is not good to send off. But don't worry, long-term tasks, don't need him to complete so quickly. Fisher hated spells so much. Would he be ashamed to know that he was in an office he used to deal with spells? So you have to develop a few more spells, such as changing him and coming over every day to clean up. But he quickly vetoed the idea, because he couldn't make the imitation of him react the same way he did. That spell is likely to be uncovered. Then his people will collapse. So every day when Filch is gone, he knocks his office a few times with his wand. In this way, it is absolutely possible to have the value of the father, and it can also stabilize the human structure. Kill two birds with one stone. Halloween is fast approaching. During this time, Darren would run to Mr. Filch every day to stay in his office for a while, knock on his table with his wand, cast a spell, and then study some of his newly acquired toys. Basically, every time he finished cleaning, Darren could gain 2 favorability ratings. He found that this Mr. Filch was still quite arrogant. Every day, there is also a special time to leave in a big way, and when he returns, he is also very loud, leaving him enough time to clean. Maybe this gentleman thinks he is embarrassed, but that's not all. The arrival of Halloween made Darren realize that the peaceful life was about to be disrupted again. Sure enough, before Halloween, Harry apologetically told him that he had promised Nick to attend his death party. Darren almost subconsciously wanted to refuse. Fortunately, he was in control of himself, because that's going to crash into people. So he thought for a moment and said, wherever my brother goes, I will go. Ding, father plus 100. Ding, father plus 100. Ding, father plus 100. Harry looked at him movingly, reached out and patted Darren's shoulder, and was about to say something when he saw Darren's face unnaturally hide. What's wrong? Harry asked solemnly. Darren would never hide from him, and looking at Darren's appearance, it was obvious that he had been slapped by him. But he only used a little strength. How could it hurt? Could it be that Slytherin bullied Darren? Brother, I'm all right. Let's go to the death anniversary party. What to go to? You let me look at your shoulders first. Episode 166. Lady Lorith is petrified. Brother, my shoulders are all right. Darren shook his shoulder, with a smile on his face. It was just that he thought it was a good cover-up, but Harry, Ron, and Hermione could all see that he was lying. It should hurt, right? Not only one shoulder, but also the other shoulder, should also have problems. Let me see. Don't you listen to your brother? Harry said angrily. Darren pursed his lips, his face gradually pale, and he looked at Harry somewhat prayerfully. Brother, hurry up. Unable to deceive his brother at all, Darren opened his collar with trembling hands. Harry, they were stunned, because Darren's shoulders were bruised, even his arms were swollen. What's going on? Did those Slytherin people bully you? Harry angrily pulled out his wand, and he rushed to Slytherin and pulled them all out and beat them all. Just knocked them on the head with his wand. No, not a Slytherin classmate, it's my own problem. Brother, don't you ask, let's go to the death party, right? If you want to go to the death party, you can also tell your brother, what the hell is going on? Don't be afraid, your brother can beat them too. Harry gritted his teeth and said, Darren was so kind, so innocent, why did Slytherin bully his brother all day? Or someone else? Those people didn't like him and bullied his brother? Darren, you say it, and your brother will take you to the funeral party. Darren bowed his head in silence. Harry was furious. He spun around a few times and said, if you don't say it, I will, and I will. Don't take you to the taboo gala, brother. Darren's green eyes had begun to turn red. Harry held back his grief. He was very angry that someone dared to bully Darren, and Darren did not dare to tell him who it was and why. You are not allowed to go, you stay at the banquet, and think about how to explain it to me when I come back. Harry took Ron and Hermione to his heart, turned and left. Only Darren was left with his head bowed, his face full of joy. Aha! The plan succeeds. And who did it? Of course he did it himself. Just now, he had a clever move and made himself a bruise and purple belt swelling. Then without telling the truth, you have to go to the death party. Harry would certainly not let him go, because he didn't say it. Isn't that what it means? Of course, he was also ready to blame the wound on the reason for cleaning Filch's office. In order not to let the savior be punished, his younger brother, who cleaned Filch every day, asked if this was touching, but he couldn't laugh now. I could only suppress my smile and return to the Slytherin table with a confused attitude. Throughout the night, he tastelessly killed a fat mound, also nibbled on 2 cakes, a bunch of small puddings, and a couple of ice creams. Because he was too sad and didn't pay attention to eating too much, he gave him a stomachache. Darren suspected he might be having diarrhea. Quietly rubbing his stomach, Darren gave up on continuing to watch the Skull Dance Company's performance. Although it was good-looking, he couldn't hold back immediately. If his little father had watched the dance for a while and then put a fart in the pocket of his pants at Hogwarts, he would have died here today. Whispering to Cassandra, he went out to the bathroom, took a fairly steady step, and anxiously left the auditorium. When he came out of the toilet, he swore to the heavens and the earth that he would never eat again. He really didn't think that eating in the wizarding world would also have diarrhea. Alas, tear him up. So hungry, a creepy voice faintly sounded upstairs. Apparently, the basilisk has already begun. Ding, sensing that there is a scene of the Holy Father system playing around the host, now release a temporary task. Follow the sound of the basilisk and walk to your destination after 3 minutes. Ding, after the task is completed, get the father value plus 500. Does the host receive the task? Not. The rewards are not many. But it's not that it can't be picked up. Access. Darren listened to the voice and gradually followed him upstairs. And control the time. When 3 minutes had passed, Darren finally appeared in a crowd of people watching. Ding, congratulations to the host for getting 500 father points. What's wrong? Darren asked doubtfully, but no one answered his question. But after he asked the question, he gave him a passage. Darren immediately saw, in the midst of all the people watching Harry and the 3 of them. The 3 of them were pale and their bodies trembling. It was like seeing something terrible. It should be the petrified Mrs. Loris. This bleak savior. Brother, are you all right? Why are everyone around you? Are you injured? Being bullied? Darren rushed over anxiously and looked at Harry's body carefully. His face was extremely pale, and he looked even more pitiful than Harry and the 3 of them. No, yes. Harry shook his head hurriedly, his eyes turning to the side. Darren pretended to notice the scene next to him. There were 2 torches burning on the wall next to them, and between the 2 torches, I don't know what to scribble some handwriting. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, be wary. And under the handwriting, there is a cat. The cat's eyes stared at Darren, the skinny body, so that Darren suddenly remembered that he didn't know where to run to Lizzie. The guy had rarely been lying on top of Hagrid since he ran out of Hagrid last year. That guy now likes to sleep in his dorm during the day and still run around at night as he used to. He remembered that Raz had become good friends with Lady Lorith before. I don't know where Mrs. Loris has been petrified and where Lizzie has run. But it's all irrelevant. Darren made a nervous look and walked over cautiously. After a moment's hesitation, Mrs. Loris was removed. He tapped lightly on Mrs. Lorith's body with his wand. It is indeed petrified, and there is no other problem. Darren put his hand on Mrs. Lorith's head again, and he was ready to try his mind healing. It's just that. Potter, who made you mess with things here? Episode 167. Mr. Filch is furious. Snape looked at the cub angrily. He knew that giving this little cub the healing of his mind was definitely not a good thing. Under what circumstances would you dare to use psychic healing? If this is a fatal problem, will this little cub also have to die? Potter, who made you move things here? If he hadn't come in time, the Potter family's cubs would have died here. Teach, Professor. I just want to try. I felt as if I could do one, Darren stuttered. He looked startled. Still, he tried to explain to Snape his intentions to save the cat. Hey, what would you do? How much more could a professor or a headmaster be? Maybe you want to kill Harry Potter. No, kill the cat? Snape laughed sarcastically. Without waiting for Darren to pluck up the courage to explain, he suddenly set his sights on Harry. Huh? The famous Harry Potter, he must hate this cat so much, so he doesn't know what method to use. I didn't, Harry said angrily. Darren also explained anxiously, Professor, Lady Lorith is petrified, Harry can't do it. Snape looked into his eyes and thought of Lily for an instant. The same is true of Lily, who is always smart, kind, and has her own interpretation of everything. She was like a passionate little angel. Darren was too much like her. He couldn't even get angry with Darren, but he couldn't let that continue. Darren had to hate him. As Dumbledore said, no Death Eater would care, Harry Potter's brother would be innocent. So in order not to involve Darren in the future, He must break up his relationship with Darren as soon as possible now. So his eyes gradually hollowed out, and then he said sarcastically, Harry Potter can't do it, isn't there still your brother? All the evidence proves that Harry Potter did it, only the three of them did not attend the banquet, you say, not the three of them, who would it be? It can't be that someone deliberately planted a bribe to wrong them, right? As for you, you are also suspicious, you left the scene suddenly before, and then appeared here again, maybe you helped him, what your accomplices did. I'm going to tell Dumbledore to fire you all, Snape said as he stared into Darren's eyes. He had thought that what he saw must be an angry expression. Who knew that he found that the little cub listened to his words, as if he wanted to understand something, suddenly interrupted him, plucked up the courage to say to him, Professor, in fact, I did this thing. I was not accustomed to Mrs. Loris during this time, so I tricked Mrs. Loris into coming here and petrified it, but all this has nothing to do with my brother. Don't expel him, you want to expel me, just fire me. Snape was silent. He shouldn't expect anything from this little cub. He said it all, and the little cub didn't even hate him for not saying it, and thought that maybe someone was really planting Harry Potter. In order not to let Harry Potter be expelled, he followed his words and helped Harry Potter to cover all the charges. Darren didn't do it. I didn't do it either. Harry glared at Snape angrily. Snape stood up straight with disdain. With this reckless lion, what else does he want to do? Wait, I'll go and ask Dumbledore to see what he says. Maybe he'll expel you all. Snape dragged his robe around violently, and a black robe flipped away. Harry looked at Snape's back and felt his heart go up into his throat. Still, he looked back at Darren. Darren, I've implicated you again, Harry said sadly. He didn't know what was going on, and always heard that strange and terrifying sound. After attending the death party today, he heard that voice again. Because the voice was so terrible, he was worried for a moment and ran to the scene. Who knew what they were seeing was such a scene? They had wanted to leave, who knew it was seen, and now a lot of people say he did it. It's okay, brother, I believe you, Darren said firmly. Harry smiled happily. Yes, Darren believed him. Darren was always like that, always believing in him, but he laughed involuntarily again. Because of believing in him, Darren was also accused of being an accomplice by Snape. Knowing that he had listened to Snape say that he had done it, did not refute his words, and also saved the implication of Dallin. Now, maybe they're all going to be fired. Enemies of the heir, be wary, the next one is you, Scarhead. Malfoy squeezed in from the outside unhappily. He looked at Harry and laughed badly, but when he saw Darren, his face changed and he quickly stepped back. Although Darren was his brother, he always beat him. The key is that he can't beat Darren. Even if Darren doesn't use strength, he can only be suppressed and beaten by Darren. He didn't want to be beaten up again by Darren here. What's wrong? What's wrong? What's going on here? Filch squeezed in from outside. Apparently he had been shouted over by Malfoy's voice. What heirs? What chamber? Filch thought curiously. Then he was stunned. He saw Lady Loris lying on the ground, eyes wide open, her body stiff, as if she had been dead for a long time. He stumbled back several steps, then grabbed his face with both hands. Wailing cried out, my cat, my cat. Darren's face grew paler. He opened his mouth with a look of utter intolerability, then walked over to Mr. Filch, put his hand on Mr. Filch and said, Sir, calm down, Mrs. Lawleth. It's your brother. It's Harry Potter. You killed my cat. I knew that you had come to clean me every day during this time, and it must not be what you said, what to let me take care of your brother. You must be trying to help Harry Potter. You want to figure out if I'm or not. It's you anyway, I'm going to kill you. Episode 168, No one can hurt students in school. Ding, sensing that there is a scene of the Holy Father system playing around the host, now release a temporary task. Block Harry when Filch wants to punch Harry Potter. And not to resist Filch's beating. When Filch was about to pull out the knife, he said, Mr. Filch, if this makes you a little happier, please try harder. Ding, after the mission is completed, get the squib to become the wizard method complex version. Will the host receive the task? Access. Sure enough, this squib turned wizard from a theoretical version to an extremely complex version. Apparently, the system intends to let him publish it step by step in this order. Of course, it is still necessary to hurry up and do the task. Seeing that Filch had pounced on Harry, Harry was almost frightened. It is estimated that I have never seen such a horrific performance by the families of the victims. Darren hurriedly blocked Harry's way. Filch slammed his fist into Darren's body. Darren made a pained look, but still stopped Harry behind him and did not dodge. It's all you who killed my cat. It's all you, pretending to clean me up. Pretend as if you're helping your brother, but you're actually trying to kill my cat. Thanks to the fact that I will give you time every day to let you go to the cleaning. Who knows that you are such a reprehensible? Filch scolded loudly. Harry was stunned, and he suddenly remembered the bruises on Darren's shoulders and the swelling on his arms. Is it because of cleaning up Filch? And what Filch said to help him? Why help him? What did Darren ask you to help with? Harry asked suddenly. Darren shook his head hurriedly, and he said anxiously, It's not that I asked Mr. Filch to help my brother. It was I who made a mistake and went to clean Mr. Filch. I lied to Mr. Filch. Only then did Filch think I was helping my brother again. Darren shook his head vigorously and told Harry not to ask any more questions. But what he said, Harry didn't believe at all. Darren says he lied to Filch? How can it be? Will Darren deceive? That's a joke. Filch, what did Darren tell you? Harry roared angrily. Tell me what? The little cub told me, say what to let me see you come back from training Quidditch at night, and if you throw mud spots, don't punish you. He will help you with the punishment task. The result is all deceitful. He is a liar. He is to kill my cat. I'm going to kill you, Darren Porter, and you, Harry Potter. Filch's hand had begun to creep into his arms. Darren noticed that it was the shape of a dagger. He closed his eyes nervously and said bitterly, Mr. Filch, if this makes you feel better, you can punish me with more excessive injuries. Let my brother go. I will not let him go. I will make you all pay the price. Boom. The dagger in Filch's hand was knocked out. Argus, Dumbledore walked in through the entrance of the corridor. He had other professors behind him. I remember saying that no one can hurt students in school, Dumbledore said solemnly. Almost instantaneously, Dumbledore had come to everyone, took Lady Loris, and continued, come with me, Harry, Ron, and Hermione. And of course, Darren, you too, come to my office. My office is closest to here. Lockhart hurried over. Thank you, Gilderoy. Lockhart was alive and well in front of him. He walked behind Dumbledore, and by the way, he looked at Darren and asked, oh my god, Darren, you would do such a thing, you would kill a cat. I heard it all. Darren didn't kill Lady Loris. Harry angrily pulled the silent Darren behind him. His brother was so kind, how could he possibly touch that cat? Then why did he help Filch clean up? You ask who's going to go. Gilderoy, this matter is still inconclusive. Don't just frame the children. Dumbledore turned back and said solemnly, well, your headmaster is really a cunning old dog, and he thinks I'm right, Gilderoy said smugly. Darren admired his courage. Even Dumbledore dared to laugh. He also insisted that the son of the goddess Snape was the murderer, and that the goods were not dead in the original book, apparently because Snape did not like Harry. Shut up, Snape scolded Lockhart in a low voice. Lockhart wanted to speak again, and who knew that he saw all the professors throwing angry looks at him. Obviously, if he said one more word, I was afraid that all the professors would do something to him together. Well, if you insist, arrived at Lockhart's office, quietly. Darren noticed that it was plastered with pictures of Lockhart. And the photos will move. All Lockhart winked at him together, and Darren almost threw up. However, for the sake of the people, he still lowered his head in disgust, pretended to be afraid and nervous, and stood in front of Dumbledore. Before lowering his head, he caught Dumbledore's inquiring gaze. No way? What else did he do that made old Dang suspicious? Shouldn't it be nothing? Forget it, the big deal is to spit out the truth and take the mind of the gods, and he is still afraid of this? As Darren lowered his head, Dumbledore placed Mrs. Loris on the long table and began to examine it carefully. Harry and Ron and Hermione looked at Darren twice from time to time, and pain flashed in their eyes. Apparently Darren was truly innocent. He really wanted Filch to have less trouble with Harry, and he wanted Harry to be more relaxed. In order to curry favor with Filch, he tries to wash Filch's office by hand, only to be falsely accused by Filch of deliberately approaching him and killing his cat. Harry was even more guilty. He had never noticed what Darren had done for him, much less when Darren had gone to Filch's office to clean up. If he hadn't discovered the wound on Darren's shoulder today, or Filch had thought Darren was the murderer and said these words himself, he didn't know how many things Darren had done silently behind his back. Episode 169, The Basilisk's Gaze. As time passed, Harry withdrew his gaze from Darren. He looked at Dumbledore and his heart began to freak out again. What if Dumbledore thought it was him and Darren who did it? Or would he take everything into his own hands, like Darren? But it immediately occurred to him that if he did this, I was afraid that Darren would definitely scramble to confess his guilt with him. Maybe Snape would propose not to investigate, and then just fire the two of them together. Don't think about it. Harry had no doubt that Snape would have done such a thing, because Snape hated him and Darren so much. And last year, Harry had been suspicious that he was behind the corporal punishment of Darren. Unfortunately, at Darren's insistence, he believed last year that Snape had done nothing to Darren. But just by looking at Snape, he immediately overthrew his previous trust. Darren is too kind and innocent. He must have deliberately said these nonsense in order to keep his brother from worrying. It is also very likely that Snape is hiding. Harry sighed, then his eyes turned to Snape. He saw Snape looking at him in disgust, as if there was some bloody feud between them. Obviously Dumbledore also said that his father had saved Snape. Harry couldn't figure out why Snape hated him so much. It must have been a spell that killed it. I suspect it's the Transfiguration torture spell. I'm sorry I wasn't there, if I was. I can definitely save it. Lockhart broke the silence. Filch groaned. He sobbed, Mrs. Lolith is dead, my cat. They all know, they all know. I'm a squib. Harry Potter saw it, and he would certainly say that to the little cub. I said why this little cub came to me after Harry Potter saw my letter and said to help Harry Potter. He also gave me a hand cleaning of the office. Who would help a janitor? Filch cried. Although this guy is usually quite annoying, but at this time it really looks very pitiful. It's just that this pity is compared to Darren, and almost no one sympathizes with him. What would kill you, a cat and clean your office for so long? Or is poor Mr. Potter stupid? He felt that it would take so long to murder a cat? Snape said in a sarcastic tone. Then who knows? Who else would it be? Who will? do this? Filch's eyes suddenly fell on Harry. It's not that little cub, it's you. You know I'm a squib, you know. You look down on me. Enough. Argus, Lady Loris is not dead. Dumbledore interrupted Filch's accusations against Harry, but its whole body stiffened. Like being frozen, it was petrified. Same as Darren had tested before. I knew it was him, this little cub, and I hadn't heard the spell at all. Only Dumbledore, you, and this little cub know that my cat is petrified. He must have wanted to make a splash and petrify my cat and then save my cat. Filch interrupted Dumbledore loudly, and he looked at Darren angrily. Darren pursed his lips, turned pale, and said in a gentle voice as much as possible, Mr. Filch, I have only seen this situation in books, and the latest antidote I have made can also be unraveled. Look, I know. He's just trying to preach his antidote, isn't he? By the way, the Ministry of Magic hasn't approved his antidote for use on the market, and he's starting to want to use my cat to promote his antidote. If Potter had this brain, maybe he should petrify you. Then maybe you don't have to listen to you say this. Snape looked at Filch with disdain. For the first time, Harry felt that what Snape had said seemed to be quite good. Although he had heard that Snape looked down on Filch, because Filch was always dirty, and was a squib. Of course, the word squib, he just knew. Perhaps Dumbledore also felt that Filch had gone too far, so he put down his wand and said solemnly, second grade, can't do such advanced magic. But Darren Porter is the best one, he may be able to do it, and he can make the latest antidote. Maybe he can? Filch growled. Then he suddenly looked at Snape and asked, Professor, I heard those students talk about it before, and you said before that Darren Porter had sneaked out before, right? The case is solved. Darren skimmed his lips. All right, he said why Dumbledore was a little weird about him today. It turned out that it was because he finally ran out. Snape was stunned by Filch's words. He also did not expect that the words that he wanted Darren to hate him before would be remembered by the students, and that Filch would hear. Then I'm going to ask Potter Jr. Maybe he can give you an explanation, Snape said in a low voice. A sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. He didn't help Potter anymore, and the little cub should have understood that he wasn't some gentle, kind Professor Snape. He was greasy, cold, disgusting Snape. All eyes were on Darren. Darren was tempted to tell these people that he had diarrhea. But the little father certainly could not have diarrhea. So, ding, sensing that there is a scene of the Holy Father system playing around the host, now release a temporary task. In the eyes of everyone's attention, his face was extremely pale and he said, I don't know why all this time, I always hear strange sounds, like saying kill, tearing. It was at the banquet that I suddenly heard that voice. The voice kept moving, and I could only follow it, and I heard it as if it had stopped in the basement toilet. So in order to keep it, I stayed there for a long time until I heard it and left again. Ding, after the mission is completed, get the gaze of the basilisk. Will the host receive the task? Pick up. Episode 170, I should have said it earlier. The gaze of the basilisk. Don't know what kind of reward it is, but Darren is clearly not a man willing to miss out on rewards. After finding that everyone was watching him, Darren's face grew paler. It wasn't until his face was bloodless that he said slightly self-deprecatingly, during this time, I always heard some terrible sounds. When Darren said this, Harry suddenly asked, is it a tear? Kill him. Tear him up. Yes. Brother, how do you know? Darren suddenly looked at Harry in horror. Harry looked back in the same horror. Obviously understood, they could all hear the voice. But in order not to worry the other party, none of them said it. Why don't you tell your brother? Harry asked anxiously. I'm sorry, brother. Looking at Darren's guilty expression, Harry sighed deeply. He didn't tell Darren that he could hear strange noises because he was afraid he was worried, but he never thought that Darren could hear them. And the two of them thought about going together, and neither of them told each other. If any of them had spoken out, they might have known about it earlier. But looking at Darren's more self-reproachful look, Harry felt that it was more to blame himself. He was the older brother, and he should have said it first. You guys don't pretend to be here. Where is the terrible sound? I've been in this school for a long time, how come I've never heard of it? Dumbledore, I think you should give me these two students, and then let me clean them up in the same way as before, and let them tell the truth. Filch looked at Darren and Harry with a fierce look. Durrance flinched and took a step back, but immediately he took another step forward to block Harry. He said with some trepidation, Mr. Filch, I am absolutely telling the truth, I can swear. If the sound I hear is false, then let me go back to that orphanage, or let me be killed by Voldemort. The sound is definitely true. So the oath is absolutely right. Anyway, Darren didn't swear that everything he said was true. Oh, everybody swears, Filch couldn't help but say, but apparently it is no longer as aggressive as before. Well, Filch, if you're done with your, then you should know that there are many professors sitting here in Dumbledore, and everyone has the ability to discern. Maybe we should listen to Potter and keep talking, even if they made it up, Snape said in a long tone. Thank you for believing me, Professor Snape. Darren looked gratefully at Snape. Snape was a little annoyed. He had already spoken like this. Why would the little cub thank him? What a stupid little cub. Seeing that someone believed him, Darren smiled softly. His smile was not hazy, it was still so sunny. Snape snorted. Don't want to see this little cub again. Darren obediently continued. At the banquet, I was very sad because my brother didn't take me to the death party. Harry sighed. Originally, when he and Hermione were blocked in the corridor, he was still thankful that he did not take Darren Porter. Otherwise, it will also involve Darren, who knows that Darren himself came out. Darren looked at Harry's expression, lowered his head guiltily, and continued. I was at the banquet when I suddenly heard that voice saying that it was hungry. I'm so worried. I don't know what it is, but it's hungry. Maybe it's a giant beast that probably eats students, so I decided to follow it and look for traces of it. Because I solved a troll in first grade, I thought I could. Snape snorted. Nothing more reckless than a Gryffindor. Darren felt even more guilty, his green eyes filled with mist. However, seeing that everyone was waiting, he still said very well, I followed it to the toilet in the basement, trying to find its tracks, but I didn't find it. I can only feel that it is still there, and I just guard the toilet. I don't know how long it suddenly ran again, I don't know where it ran from, it just ran suddenly. I followed it away, listening to its voice everywhere looking for it, and when I thought I had found it, just saw the brother and Ron and Hermione them. I almost thought they were attacked. Ding! Congratulations to the host for getting the basilisk's gaze. Basilisk gaze, immune basilisk's eyes. The basilisk, who had been underground, was awakened, but it found that the man was not its owner. And while it was running around, it found its little owner. Is that all? Before Darren could take a closer look at the reward, he heard Dumbledore's questioning. He nodded seriously, indicating that he hadn't missed a point. But he still said with some guilt, actually, when I saw Mrs. Lawless, I was really sorry. Because Mrs. Lawless should have been hurt by the owner of that voice. I should have told the professor earlier. Darren's eyes turned red. Filch turned his eyes slightly, unbearably. In fact, after entering Dumbledore's office, he understood that it was definitely not Darren. Darren couldn't do such a thing. But who let the scene just a few of them? His cat, the only cat that accompanied him. He had just thought that it was really dead. I'm sorry, Mr. Filch. Darren bowed deeply to Filch apologetically. Filch's eyes were red. He choked and turned around, not wanting to face Darren. Harry let out a small sigh next to him. This Filch had just been furious, and now that he knew that he had wronged Darren, he did not apologize, and even turned around. It should be his cat who had an accident. He thought of it with glee, and in the blink of an eye he met Snape's eyes again. As soon as he saw Snape's eyes, Harry knew he was going to suffer, because Snape gave him a smile. It was a greasy, disgusting smile. Harry intuitively guessed that the old man might be trying to find something for him. P.S. Don't worry about the protagonist exposing Voldemort's bloodline, the author will have it in the later stages. Even Voldemort's blood is exposed, there will be no abuse, believe in the author's level, and feel Darren's life at Hogwarts with the author.